It's hard to look at your papers and have the microphone so close.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm open to solutions.
well, it's okay. I mean,
No,
it's
no,
okay.
when I go over to Nate's to do the other podcast, it's like
What
he's
podcast?
got me like super close.
The one that with the other artist.
Oh, with Emily McPhee.
Inevitable art.
How many episodes have you guys done?
We recorded like 10.
But you haven't released any yet?
Nope.
Mm.
I got to do that soon.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so we're recording.
are you ready?
Yeah? Do you want me to start?
Yeah, do you want to welcome everybody?
Yes. Awesome. Welcome to episode 1. No. Let me start over. Welcome. When you mess up the number.
We're leaving all of this in.
No, okay. Okay, welcome to episode 2. I feel like I'm like not being myself or something.
Slap yourself on the cheek.
Yeah.
Yeah. Splash some water on your face.
Just kidding. Okay. All right. Welcome to episode 2 of the Self-Help Hangover podcast. We are going to talk about chapter 1 of Think and Grow Rich.
I'm Kirk.
And this is Maegan.
And this podcast is to kind of rediscover the benefits and also assess the pitfalls of self-help books. In this case, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Mm-hmm.
So chapter 1 is called Introduction, believe it or not. Do you remember some of the stories that happen in this chapter?
Yes. So one of the ones that I took notes on is he talks about Andrew Carnegie and how he started out as a poor immigrant and was able to achieve great successes. And I'm trying to remember the specific details, but we talked about in episode 1 about in the introduction, Napoleon Hill was allegedly assigned by Andrew Carnegie to write this book, but there's some dispute about that.
Uh-huh. So there are 3 stories that I remember in particular from this chapter. One of them is about a guy named Barnes who really wanted to work with Edison.
Oh, that's right.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm. He wanted to work with Edison, but he didn't have any money, and he was just able to get a train ticket. Was that right?
He didn't even ride like he didn't get a passenger ticket. He rode basically in
like one of the carts with
in a cargo.
Yeah, a cargo train
ticket or something.
Yeah. And he wanted to work with Edison. Yeah, that's right. So he rode in a cargo train to get to Edison and asked him if he could work for him. And he got rejected, right? The first time?
Good question. Well, so basically what Napoleon Hill is saying is Barnes didn't want to work for Edison. He wanted to partner with Edison.
That's right, yeah.
But he was in no position. Like he had no money,
he had no
experience.
Credibility. Yeah.
And so he bought this ticket and just showed up and said, let me start someplace, right?
Yeah.
I can relate to this a bit because when I decided to do art and I wanted to study with an artist, and I actually jumped on a Greyhound bus and rode this Greyhound bus across the country to Philadelphia. I got off at the Philadelphia station and went and studied with this artist in New Jersey for you're probably thinking, well, Philadelphia's in Pennsylvania, right? But it's pretty close to where they were in New Jersey. Anyway.
I was not thinking that.
So, yeah, so I can relate to that. Like just doing something, whatever step you can think of
Yeah.
to take that next step,
Yeah.
which I feel is what Barnes did here to try to get to Edison.
I kind of relate to that too, because I remember when I was in high school, I wanted to have some direction in life, but I didn't. And I remember one day I was talking to my friend about it, Jing Jing, if she's listening to this. But I was talking
We
to her
love you,
about
Jing
it.
Jing.
Yeah, we do. But we were talking to her. I was talking to her, and she told me, she was like, well, you can do like, she basically told me that I can do anything. And I remember just being that really, for some reason, switched a switch in my brain, because I just didn't really like believe that I could do anything, basically. And I remember thinking the next day, like, if I could do anything, what would I do? And I thought, I don't know if anyone knows who Kelsey Wells is, but she's like this, she's like this beautiful fitness influencer from Utah. Like she's super awesome, like just so toned, has her own business, has her own app. And I remember just thinking, like, if I could be exactly like Kelsey Wells, that would be my dream. And I remember that day I got my internship to become a personal trainer. I had like never like thought about it before, but that day I asked if I could start an internship as a personal trainer. And that was like the beginning of it all. So
Cool. I've never heard that
really?
story.
Okay.
I don't think so. So that would be similar to what Napoleon Hill calls a definite major purpose. And he said that Barnes was not, when Barnes got there and he, probably got like an entry-level job or something, he didn't say to himself, well, what's the use? I guess I'll change my mind and go be a salesman. No, he said, I came here to go into business with Edison, and I'll accomplish this, and if it takes the remainder of my life.
Wow. That really inspires me when I was listening to this, because I love that idea of just going so steadfastly towards something and just believing that you can do it no matter what, and just saying, I don't care, I'm going for it. It's just like so fearless. So I respect it.
I think it's cool, and it's also got a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
And the problem that I have with this is,
I'm so sorry.
no problem. That it's time.
It's
time for me to reveal my problem.
Yeah.
So my problem with it is his goal, according to Napoleon Hill, Mr. Barnes's goal was to be a partner with Thomas Edison. So, but what's Thomas Edison's? Does he have a say in this?
Yeah, that's
Like,
actually so
what
true.
you're doing is you're saying that if I assert my will into the universe, that will is going to overcome the will of somebody else.
That's a very valid problem, because it's like when someone, it's like someone like nagging you almost to like be like work with them, and like maybe that's not the person you want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally can see that side of it. Also, it kind of gives off the energy of like you have to achieve success by like latching onto someone else who already has success instead of creating your own, which I kind of don't. Yeah, I think that's a bad philosophy to have.
Okay, yeah, cool. I can appreciate that. So, and he says, I actually like this paragraph. He says, when the opportunity came, it appeared in a different form and from a different direction than Barnes had expected. Of course, I'm reading now. I guess we should say quote and unquote or something. That is one of the tricks of opportunity. It has a sly habit of slipping in by the back door. and often it comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. Perhaps this is why so many fail to recognize opportunity. That kind of reminds me of, right now, what are those Stoic books that are popular right now? Well, one of them is the obstacle is the way, right? That's the same idea here, I think, that the opportunity comes disguised in the form of misfortune. But if we can recognize that a lot of times the obstacles provide a way to find success,
Yeah.
then that can be to our benefit. And I believe that, when I was starting as an artist, I was trying to get into a lot of galleries. And they'd be like, "Oh, you've got too much variety. Like we really love this painting. Can you make them all look like this?" They wanted to have a product that they could rely on. And then I was also doing things that were kind of out of the ordinary. I was interested in religious themes, but they're also kind of like original or different or like not dogmatic, kind of poetic in their own way. And so they didn't fit into what a lot of the galleries around were marketing. And ultimately that led me to create my own path, and have work that is more recognizable as my own, and which has led then to starting an academy and starting a gallery because I was forced to, because I didn't have the opportunities to sell where I would have chosen to in the early years.
That's so true, yeah. And it's also like sometimes if you get rejected, that can be fuel to drive you forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what happens to Mr. Barnes is Mr. Edison, Thomas Edison, had created this device and was having a hard time selling it.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Barnes was like, "Hey, give me a chance. I'll sell it." And then he became like a nationwide distributor of
because he
Edison's
was like
product.
super good at selling it, right? Because he could sell it to pretty much anybody.
Yeah, to the point that according to Hill, a business association grew and they used the slogan "Made by Edison and installed by Barnes."
Wow.
So he couldn't even afford a passenger train ticket at the beginning, but by the end he was like, billed as a partner with Edison.
That's super cool. I like that idea of building like something starting out from nothing. I think that's really cool.
Nice. Okay, anything else about that story before I talk about the second story that I remember in this chapter?
I know.
The second story is a guy named Darby who is digging for gold.
Okay, that's right.
What do you remember about
I'm like,
this story?
I promise I listened to this.
What do you remember about this story?
So this guy, he was digging for gold and he found gold and he went to go get his family or like his people to like bring them to come help him get the gold. I'm going in the right direction.
Keep going.
And so he comes back to this spot and they are like digging and digging. They can't find it anymore. And he was like freaking out and didn't know what. Anyways, so another guy comes and digs and turns out that Darby was like 4 feet away from the gold. So he just stopped too soon. But if he had just kept digging 4 more feet, then they would have found it.
Yeah, so they sold the equipment, right? And then these other people came in. They hired a mining engineer. The engineer said, "Well, you got to understand ores, and this is offset 4 feet. If you went 4 feet this way, you would have tapped back into the vein." And so that those people made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And what was the lesson that Darby took from this story?
So, I mean, the lesson... I'm not sure what the lesson was that Darby took from it specifically, but I mean, I think the overall theme is not to give up and to keep persisting forward.
Okay, I like your interpretation of the thing, of the lesson. There's another good lesson that I think that isn't brought out, and that is to hire consult an expert to consult you, right?
For sure.
These guys hired a mining engineer that just put him back on the right path. But unfortunately, the main lesson that's derived from this story by Napoleon Hill is to never say no.
Oh. Okay, that's an interesting
Darby
lesson.
later became a salesperson. He says, "I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because men say no when I ask them to buy insurance."
Wow.
Okay. My basic problem with that is consent.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Like again, it comes to, are you trying to overpower somebody else's will
Yeah.
in your efforts to attain your goal or to make your idea happen? And in my opinion, there may be times when you need to persist in the face of rejection.
Yeah.
I've heard some people say that they won't mentor someone unless they show persistence, and they'll turn them down maybe, or kind
As
of
like a
push
test
them
or
away.
something.
I don't love that idea either, but I also don't love like the idea that if you stand on somebody's porch and don't
And
say no
refuse
and
to
refuse
leave
to
until
leave,
until they say
that's
yes.
a good approach. That's not the way I like. Of course, I should say I'm not like a salesperson. I have never imagined myself as a salesperson.
I've never wanted to be a salesperson.
When I was selling something in elementary school, I remember, and we had the nicest librarian in our elementary school. I may have graduated to junior high. I can't remember. But anyway, I thought to myself, I'm going to go to this elementary librarian's house. There's no way she'll say no to me. She's the nicest person.
So you were taking advantage of her.
So I went up to, and I gave her my pitch. Again, I can't remember what I was selling, but she basically said no. And I thought, oh, I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was like, if I can't get the nicest person in the world to say yes, not to take into account the fact that probably every kid in the elementary school
had already come over to her house.
to her door.
Yeah.
But I knew I wasn't cut out for sales. I'm like, this is a miserable feeling. I hate it. So for what that's worth, I am an artist, though, right? And artists really are known for hating to sell their work.
Yeah.
And to some extent, I overcome my dislike of selling in order to do the thing that I love most, which is to make artwork and make a living creating it. So while I hate sales, I do believe that if you really have something that you can stand behind, that often you can... selling becomes presenting it to somebody.
Yeah.
But there's no way I would beg somebody to take my artwork.
Yeah, for sure.
And if they say no, I'm not going to refuse to hear them.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I've never been good at sales. I worked at a very big name Utah gym that I won't name, but for I think like 3 years that I worked there. And one of the things I hated about working there is that they were so pushy about you getting sales and getting getting so many new clients per month. And that was like, that's literally, from what I've heard, that's their whole business model is all based on personal training. So that's how they're able to keep their memberships so cheap. But that was just one of the things I really hated because I mean, I've never been pushy or like a pushy salesman, but
So did you ever find yourself in a situation where they said no initially, but you continued to work with them and then they said yes?
I don't think so. I don't think I've ever been in that position. I was very like, it's like if someone says no, I will back off immediately because I don't want to sell someone something that they don't want to buy, that they're not interested in. But I remember, oh my gosh, some of the sales tactics that they would use. Because I remember, so this is an interesting story. I mean, it's interesting to me, but so I started training this girl and I did a free consultation with her and she was super interested in buying. And she was like, thank you so much for being so nice to me. And she said, I did a consultation at one of the other locations of this gym. And she had told them when they were selling to her, I need to go home and talk to my husband about like our finances to see if we can afford this. And the salesperson said, well, if your husband says that you can't do this, then he doesn't love you. And I just remember
you don't agree with that tactic?
Yeah, well, I was like, oh my God, I am so sorry that happened to you. Okay, so we're gonna do some advertisements. We're just advertising our own stuff.
Well, let's advertise Brian's stuff. So Brian is here. He is our audio engineer. Brian, he wrote and recorded our podcast music.
Yeah.
Right.
And he is the best. He wrote my song for my other podcast and he's recorded everything for me. Whenever I have music or audio, I always go to Brian. And he's the best in town.
Hey, Brian, where can people... Do you want to hop on here for a second?
He's like, no.
Yes.
Just tell us about your... about you as a music artist and also as a music producer. How can people work with you?
Hello, my name is Brian. And I'm a music producer, and you can check out my solo work under the name Dahbose, Dahbose, on all streaming platforms, and you can find me on most socials under Dahbose Music. That's Dahbose Music. And if you need a music producer, I am your guy. So cool.
What kind of music should they expect at Dahbose?
Oh, synthy stuff. Whatever you need, as long as it's synthy or not. I can broaden my horizons as well. But yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we're glad to have Brian doing music for us, and back to the program. Okay, so there's a third story in this chapter also that also has to do with saying no. I don't remember all the details, but it's told by the same guy. So I think it's kind of his. He's probably on the speaking circuit about not accepting no for an answer. But basically, there's a white guy and a young brown girl who she approaches him for a piece of gold she needs to take home to her mom. And the guy says, no, I'm busy, leave me alone. And
yes.
And the girl doesn't move.
Yeah, and she just, because she's really young. And this was also, because she was black, right? And this was back in the day when like there was
in the South.
Yeah, in the South. And and this was a white man, and she asked him for some gold to bring back to her mom, and he told her no, and she just stood there, and she was like, she just stood so confidently, and she didn't leave. And someone was watching this, right? Was it Napoleon Hill allegedly or something?
I think the Darby guy.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. And eventually she just stood there, and she
He
said
told her to
something.
go home like 3 times.
Yeah,
or
he told her,
something.
yeah, and she just wouldn't leave. And so he ended up giving her the gold and walking away.
She said, "My mammy's got to have that 50 cents." Right?
Yeah. But yeah, and then he basically wasn't one of his takeaways from this that he took a lot of inspiration from that girl and her confidence.
Yes. And again, the takeaway message is no does not necessarily mean no.
Yeah.
Mr. Darby, later in his sales career, pointed out, and this is a quote from the book, every time a prospect tried to bow me out without buying, I saw that child standing there in the old mill, her big eyes glaring in defiance, and I said to myself, I've got to make this sale.
Wow.
The better portion of all sales I have made were made after people had said no. So, okay, so moving on. One sound idea is all that one needs to achieve success. What do you think about that idea?
I mean, it kind of reminds me of the quote in the first chapter or in the introduction, about how everything starts from an idea. Yeah, so I mean, I think obviously you need to start with like an idea or a goal, but then you have to put action into that, and yeah, I mean, I think there's other things that go into it too.
Okay. So the idea might just be the beginning.
Yeah, I think the idea is the beginning, and then, I mean, it can take years and decades to make a successful business or a successful career.
Okay, what do you think about this idea? When rich, and again, I'm quoting from the book. When riches begin to come, they come so quickly, in such great abundance, that one wonders where they have been hiding during all those lean years.
Sorry. So this one's kind of a hard thing for me to comment on because I always hear stuff like this, like money is all around us, and like the universe wants to give us money, but we just aren't like open to it, or like we just need to like get to that certain level or something. And I have never experienced having like a great amount of money. Yeah. So this is hard for me to relate to, but I do think, so I do a lot of money affirmations, and I feel like I've had a lot of actually opportunities where I was in a position where I needed like more money, or where I had like an unexpected expense and I like received money, which is weird. Like, for example, last year I mean, this is so like dumb, but I got my tax return, which was like a pretty good amount. And the year before that, I hadn't gotten like any money, I don't think, from my tax return. But anyways, I got it. And shortly after, I needed a new car. So I was able to put that towards my new car. Or one of those. Either I needed a car and then I got my tax return. I think that might have been how it happened. But I do think that like that does happen. This kind of reminds me of like, tell me if you relate to this, but when I was younger, I remember in church always hearing that like, if as long as you paid your tithing, like you would be taken care of. And like I would hear stories about that. Like people would literally have no more money and they would pay their like what they could to tithing, and then like a check would come in the mail or something. And so yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I don't pay tithing, but
What do you think about those stories?
I think they're I think those stories are very valid. I don't think, and I mean, this is will become very apparent as we go on with this podcast. I don't think that it is because of the Mormon church, though. I think it's because of like, I believe in a higher power, and I believe in like that, like the universe is like working in mysterious ways. And so I feel like I've experienced things like that where I needed money and it came to me like through various ways. So I believe in that. Like I believe that there are like sources around us that we don't really understand that can like provide us with things.
Okay. What about people who live in poverty and give?
Yeah.
Shouldn't they be lifted out of poverty for giving?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is, I mean,
But what if they aren't?
I'm not gonna lie, this is where I start to like become an atheist, because whenever I think about like people living in poverty like or the wars that are happening around the world, I'm just like, there is no God. And it reminds me of a quote I read one time that said basically the greatest evidence that there isn't a God is like children dying. Like whenever like the fact that like children die is like evidence that there's no God.
Maegan, I can't tell if you believe in a prosperity gospel or if you don't believe in a prosperity gospel.
I'm not gonna lie. So I have confusing feelings. Most of the time, I believe that there's a higher power, and I really like do stick by that, and I live by that day to day. But I am also extremely privileged. I like live in a house with a family, and I've grown up with everything that I've needed. And so when I see people who are homeless or on the streets, I literally like, I'm just like, there isn't a God. but I for the most part, I do believe that there is a higher power. I know that's like so
and you
convoluted.
believe that if you give,
and I believe, yes, I do believe
it will come back to you.
I do, yeah.
In larger amounts?
Yeah.
You believe
I
that?
mean, I don't think in larger amounts. I mean, this is so hard for me to comment on because I am like super privileged. Like if I didn't have any money, my parents would like help me, and like if I had to like, you know. So it is hard, and I do know people who have worked hard their whole lives and just life has not been good to them, and they are not in good financial positions. I'm thinking of one person in particular. I'm not going to say their name, but like, and it is just sad. So it's hard for me to comment for sure. But day to day, I feel like what part of what like keeps me going is that I do feel like there is a higher power, and I feel like no matter what, I like that things are going to be okay. And I mean, and that's obviously coming from a very privileged perspective, but.
Sorry, I put you on the spot, and
that's okay.
Really
yeah.
deep, really fast. Back to the question at hand, which is when riches begin to come, they come so quickly and in such great abundance. Now, people often ask me, "Did you get a big break, Kirk? You know, did somebody
did like one thing happen?
Did some big thing happen that gave you an art career?" And I would say no. Like I'd say that I've had a long series of small things, small breaks.
Yeah.
Break after break after break after break after break. And sometimes there were some scary times in between some of those breaks, particularly in the lean early years of an art career. It can be hard to live off of the income from an art career.
Yeah.
Right? So, but I also believe that expectation has a lot to do with it. So, for example, when I put a big price on a painting and then actually sold a painting for that big price, that changed my expectation of what was possible.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I wouldn't have ever gotten to that point if I hadn't created the expectation in my own mind and in the mind of people around me that I was creating something of value.
Yeah.
So it took time to build that expectation, and expectations, sometimes they build slowly. I guess for some people, they might build quickly, but a lot of it has to do with laying the groundwork in your own skill set, your own confidence, your own ability to carry out what people are asking you to do. And
Yeah.
once you have those pieces in place, then you can start earning money based on those things.
Yeah. And it's like I've heard of this phenomenon that happens sometimes where basically someone will go super viral on TikTok and they'll have like a business or something, but they don't have the systems in place to basically handle that. So, like, for example, maybe their product goes viral, but they don't have enough product to sell to all these people who are placing orders, or they don't have people working to like help ship the orders. And so basically, they have that break, but it just doesn't go anywhere because they weren't prepared in that moment. And they just went from like having no attention to like this huge audience, and then it just kind of backfires because they didn't have those systems in place to be prepared for that.
Right. It's a lot like so many people appearing on talent shows
Yeah.
on TV and getting a huge following,
And
but
then nothing comes
they
out
don't
of it.
have the work and the systems in place to support the new audience.
Yeah.
So it almost sometimes I feel like those shows can sometimes be a distraction because they take you out of putting those systems in place.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it takes so much time and effort away from focusing on kind of that steady build.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
All right. Well, one little tip that Napoleon Hill gives us in this chapter is that he says, one of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average man's familiarity with the word impossible.
Oh, yeah. I remember,
Do you remember
this
his
part.
tip?
Yes, I do. So this made me laugh so hard because I feel like this is something that me and Brian would make fun of, like, so hard. But he says to go find your dictionary in your house and like cut out the word impossible.
Yes.
And when I was listening to that, I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is something that me and Brian would would make fun of.
If you get a new dictionary, make sure the first thing you do is cut out the word impossible. He says, that would not be an unwise thing for you to do.
This was so funny to me. Although, so when I was younger, we actually had this thing called a can't jar, and we were not allowed to say the word can't when we were younger, like I can't do something, or like I can't, like blah blah blah. And so anytime we said can't, we had to put like some money in the jar. Do you remember that?
Did Mom set that up?
Mom did, yeah. Mom set that up. Yeah. I don't think it lasted like super long, but I remember like, yeah. But it was like cute though, because I know she was trying to like instill that message that like we can do anything. There's nothing that we like can't do, and we shouldn't limit ourselves. But
yeah, no, it was well intended for sure.
yeah.
Okay, well, anything else we want to cover in chapter 1?
I don't think, nothing for me unless you have anything else highlighted.
There's one little thing that I want to. In the next chapter, I believe he's going to tell us about his son.
Yeah.
Now we'll get to that one. The time
I remember
comes.
that, yeah.
But this little bit is so funny to me. He says, "I want you to know that the relationship between the two men that I'm about to talk about in the subsequent chapters is such that I could have taken no liberties with the facts, even if I had wished to do so. One of them has been my closest personal friend for almost 25 years. The other is my own son."
Yeah.
So it's hilarious because there's no logic there. He's basically saying, look, even if I wanted to make stuff up about these two, I couldn't because I know them so well. Anyway, I thought that was funny. All right, well, that is the chapter 1, also known as the Introduction to Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And any final takeaways?
No.
What's the best thing that we got out of this?
I think the best thing, I mean, I like the overarching message of like being persistent with your goals, and that starting with an idea and chasing after that dream, and being like having passionate about it, going after something you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think that was good. So maybe we should just leave it at that, and we'll come back for episode
2.
3.
3, yeah.
Chapter 2, episode 3.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thanks for
Thanks,
listening.
Maegan.